All right, the saga of my pollinator garden. So, if you looked at any of my garden tours previously, you may have noticed I have a bit of a milkweed problem. Or maybe it's not a problem. I started leaving the milkweed in a couple of years ago because monarchs. And last year, at the end of the year, I thought, you know what, I need to have a designated space for pollinator plants. And my big plan was to transplant them into this bed. And we set it up. We got a little bee house and we got a little butterfly house. And I put my dahlias in there. And then I threw in some perennials because nobody's got time to plant plants every year. But some just random things that I like. Hollyhocks, bee balm. There's some coneflowers I got from my husband's aunt. And then I threw in some annual cosmos, which got way bigger than I expected. Transplanted some of the daisies. This is a spider flower. Some of these I think are this Job's Tears grass that I'd planted. Threw my amaryllis in there. I've got a little watering hole for the butterflies and the bees, and then I threw in some annuals as well and some herbs because black swallowtails really like dill and parsley, and apparently so do these tiny little bees. But when I went to transplant milkweed, I discovered they are not easy to dig up. So I ended up with a few. In addition to these that finally started coming up, I also have some babies growing in there, which I think I had some seeds that just had ended up in here when we tilled it. So it's not full of milkweed like I had planned, but we'll get there because where there's one milkweed, there is many more. But I will show you what the problem with digging up milkweed is. So when the milkweed starts coming up, it's just a tiny little shoot. And so then I try to dig it up, and I dig and I dig and I dig, and now look at the top of that. That's just that tiny little bit, like an inch, was out of the ground. And the stem goes down, down, down. And then it's a taproot, which means it's this horizontal root, and a whole bunch of other milkweeds grow up from that root. So this root here, I was able to get up, but it was huge, and you had to dig so deep to get it. So it quickly became obvious that digging these things up was not easy. Of course, once you get a couple roots, it's going to shoot out a whole bunch of plants. So it's really not that big of a deal. There's my spade, and it still hadn't reached the root for the whole length of the spade. So I did transplant some, and some died off, but I think the roots were okay, and more came up. Here's a couple more that I had dug up. So that is the trouble with milkweed. And even tilling that large garden out there didn't even come close to digging up those milkweed. So this is called common milkweed. It's a little different than the milkweed that's in the south. And actually what happens is the caterpillars and butterflies are up here in the spring and summer, and then they start to fly south. When they hit a location that has the tropical milkweed, then they know it's okay to stop. So there's been some issues with folks planting the tropical milkweed in too northern of a climate, and then the butterflies stop their migration too soon and then die because it gets too cold. But the milkweed that grows here is the common milkweed, and that's the milkweed that they feed on during the summer before they migrate. So the nice part about this is the bees love it, and these flowers actually smell great. Kind of like a little slightly more subtle lilac. They don't necessarily choke out my other plants, though you can't find a row between my corn, so there's that. The pumpkins like to grow up over top of them, and I haven't noticed any issues with that. And then if you go in there, you can find yourself some caterpillars. And we usually bring some leaves and some caterpillars inside and watch them turn into chrysalis and then butterflies. So in the garage here, we've got this little butterfly house. And right up here, I actually have, there he is. The one on the left there should be ready to open up today. Basically, we just put milkweed and the caterpillars in the bottom, and they do their thing and they crawl up to the top. You'll notice some of these have, there's a empty one. Some of these have like a weird string coming out of the bottom. So what happened with those is somehow the caterpillar must have had a parasite. I can't remember what it's called. Basically, it ends up killing the chrysalis, and you can tell with that string that hangs down that one's dead. So this guy in the middle here, he's okay. When they start turning black like that, you can start seeing the pattern underneath. You know they're going to hatch pretty soon. I got one other one back there that's a little more green, and then a bunch that have already gone. So when these last two open up and we let them go, then I'll clean this all out and start over again, just to give them a little bit of a extra chance that they're not going to get knocked around from the weather or whatnot. And when that guy hatches, I will let him outside into the flower garden. Just as I guessed, he's all hatched. All right, bringing it out to sun itself and pump up its wings and get ready to migrate.